Welcome to Learn with Syed. I'm Syed Mahmood. Today we're talking about IELTS writing. We are going to generally cover Task 1 and Task 2. Now, the first point I want to raise is that when you have the question in front of you, read the question very well and make sure that you understand what is required of you. That way you can make sure you don't write anything irrelevant and you stick to the point. The second thing you need to do is to plan your answer. Some of the candidates prefer to note down a few points. You could do that, or at least make a mental note of how you're going to approach the answer, how you're going to tackle the challenge that has been thrown at you. While you're writing, don't use the same phrases or words more than once. Try to get your point across by using a different set of words, maybe meaning the same thing. For example, when we looked at one of the writing task 2 samples in one of my earlier videos, we said supporters of globalization would argue that, and in the next para we said defenders of multinational companies often point out that. Obviously, if you want, you can go and check that video, but the point I'm trying to make here is that supporters of globalization mean a set of people who are the same as defenders of multinational companies. So instead of saying the same set of words twice, we have used different words. And also, in the first occasion we said would argue that. In the second one we've said often point out that. Again, meaning the same thing, often argue that or would argue that. In the second one we are saying often point out that. So it's the same thing, but we are using different words. That way your writing has more variation and it does not get monotonous and boring to the reader. That way you score more points. The next thing you need to keep in mind is that you need to write in full proper sentences. Points written down in note form or bullet points would reduce your marks. Also, you need to write complex sentences. For example, Mansoor's coffee became cold. He heated it in the microwave. These are two simple sentences. Mansoor's coffee became cold. He heated it in a microwave. Now, if you put them together and you say, because Mansoor's coffee became cold, comma, he heated it in the microwave. That way you've put them together and made it a complex sentence. Another example is, Jaspreet studied all day. She missed her lunch. These are two simple sentences. Jaspreet studied all day. She missed her lunch. But if you say, Jaspreet, comma, studying all day, comma, missed her lunch. That way it becomes a complex sentence. So the sentence is, Jaspreet studying all day missed her lunch. That way you put two simple sentences in one and made it into a complex sentence. Try to avoid model answers of a fixed pattern because the examiners are trained to recognize them, so you should rather practice freehand writing. In task 1, do not just list out the information that you can see in front of you. Rather, try to summarize the data that has been conveyed to you and try to catch the trend. For example, instead of saying Brazil used up 50 million meter cube water in 1950s and 60 million meter cube waters in 1960s, you should rather say that Brazil used such and such amount in 1950s and they doubled the amount in the next decade. You see, instead of saying 60s, you are saying next decade, and instead of listing out the amount of water used, you are saying they doubled it. In task 1, you'd have a lot of opportunities like this to summarize the data and identify the trend and put it in writing. Always make sure that you write at least 150 words for task 1 and 250 words in task 2. Don't fall short. So how do you know exactly how many words you've written? Do you count every time? Well, you could do that, but that means you will be wasting some time there. So what you can do is, while you practice at home, you have to get a feel of how many words would be there when you have written a certain amount on the paper. So if you've written half a page, how many words that would be, you can sort of get a feel of it. And over time, you'll get more and more accurate. At the end, try to make sure you have at least a little bit of time to reread and correct your obvious and silly mistakes, because it happens. When you write, there are silly mistakes that everyone makes. So try to amend them and save some marks. I hope that was helpful. See you next time.